Your job is to represent the public, the people who elect you. Start doing your job. If you don't like it, clear off. Simple. I'd like to actually ask the members of Parliament that are present on the panel what part of democracy they don't actually understand. Parliament had a ballot, did it not, in order to have the referendum. They voted 6-1 to have the ballot. You took that ballot, you took the chance, we had the referendum, you didn't get the answer that you wanted, and now you want to turn it round. I didn't vote for the last.
The room was packed. BBC's Question Time was in full swing. Angela Rayner sat on the panel, confident as ever, ready to defend Labour's decisions. But then a single question changed everything. A man in the audience, fed up with the political back and forth, stood up. His voice was calm but firm. What part of democracy do you not understand? The air in the room shifted instantly. This wasn't just a disagreement, it was a direct challenge. And it hit hard.
Government, can I have a ballot?
Can I answer your question? I mean, what I was saying, and my clarity is that I'm not saying and I'm not suggesting we ignore the vote. The vote is quite clear. But as a Member of Parliament, I have a responsibility for British jobs, British workers,
you
and for
have
our
a
public service, and
representative.
support that. So you need clarity that we're going to safeguard that.
No. All right.
Sorry, your job is to represent the public, the people who elect you. Start doing your job. If you don't like it, clear off. Simple.
For a moment, there was silence. Then, the crowd erupted. Applause filled the studio. People nodded, some even cheered. It wasn't just about the question. It was about frustration boiling over. It was about thousands of voters feeling ignored. This man had said out loud what so many were already thinking. Rayner's face tightened. She tried to brush it off, laughing slightly, shifting in her seat. But the reaction had rattled her. Instead of answering directly, she dodged the question, spinning the conversation onto something else. Classic politician move. But it didn't work. The damage was done. The audience had seen the moment for what it was, a politician struggling to defend the very system she claimed to stand for. And in that moment, the power wasn't with her. It was with the people. Angela Rayner loves to remind people that she's from a working-class background. It's part of her whole image, Labour's down-to-earth voice of the people. But when she's actually asked who those people are, she can't even answer the question.
Because one of the things people say is, I'm not your average politician. I don't talk like other politicians. I don't act like them. And it's like, I'm a human being. And the more we can show that we're human beings as politicians as well, I think will be helpful for people to relate to us. So I think by sharing who I am, gives people a little bit of me, and then they understand.
More than once, inside Parliament, she's been pressed to define what a working person is. Simple question, right? Not for Rayner. She fumbled, dodged and danced around it. No clear answer, just vague talking points about fairness and opportunity. But here's the problem. Labour claims to be the party of the working class. If its deputy leader can't even define the very people they represent, how can they claim to fight for them? It's not just embarrassing, it's revealing. People aren't blind to this. They see the rising cost of living, job insecurity, and taxes that hit the middle and lower classes hardest. They know what being a working person means because they live it. Rayner, on the other hand, she talks about it but doesn't seem to get it. And that's the real issue. It's not just that she dodged a question, it's that her answer didn't exist. And for someone who's supposed to stand for ordinary people, that says everything.
Prime Minister's definition of working people.
The definition of working people are the people that the Tory party have failed for the last 14 years.
Well, the Deputy Prime Minister stood on a manifesto promising not to raise taxes on working people. It now appears she can't even define who working people are. So I'll give her another go. There are 5 million small business owners in this country. Are they working people?
Don't know how the shadow Deputy Prime Minister can stand there with a straight face when it was the small businesses, the working people of this country that paid the price of them crashing the economy, sending interest rates scoring. I think he needs to learn his own lessons in opposition.
Oliver Downer.
Well, I think the whole House will have heard the Deputy Prime Minister disregard 5 million hard-working small business owners.
Angela Rayner loves the story. The girl from a council estate, the single mum who worked her way up, now standing in Parliament as a voice for the working class. It's a powerful narrative, but is it real anymore? That's where things start falling apart. The Angela Rayner of today doesn't look much like the working class woman she claims to be. Her party talks about helping struggling families, yet Labour's policies hit those very people the hardest. Higher taxes, rising costs, decisions made from comfortable offices far away from the reality of everyday Britain. Critics say Rayner has become part of the same political bubble she once fought against. The Angela who once spoke about working people now seems detached from their struggles. She talks about hard-working Brits, but when pushed on specifics, she stumbles. And working-class voters, they're noticing. The ones who once saw Labour as their champion now feel abandoned. They see politicians who claim to understand them but live completely different lives. Rayner's story sounds good on paper, but outside of Parliament, where people are actually struggling, they aren't buying it anymore.
Madam Deputy Speaker, dictators cancel elections, not democracy. Dictators. 5.5 million voters in southern England are being denied the right to pass judgment on the performance of their councillors over the last 4 years. Interestingly, in areas where Reform UK are expected to do rather well. In cancelling these elections, Secretary of State, in cancelling them, you've admitted, the Secretary of State has admitted she doesn't know what will replace them. So it seems to me there is a serious risk, as previously mentioned, of not being ready in 12 months' time, in which case, can the Secretary of State be crystal clear what happens? Are they delayed a further year, or will they go ahead in May?
Elections are supposed to be the backbone of democracy, but not when Labour is in charge. In a move that sparked national outrage, Labour cancelled elections in key areas, conveniently where Reform UK was set to do well. The result? 5.5 million people lost their right to vote. This wasn't just a bureaucratic decision, it was a political strategy. Reform UK, led by Nigel Farage, has been gaining serious traction, especially in working-class areas where Labour is losing its grip. Instead of competing fairly, Labour pulled the plug. No elections, no votes, no chance for opposition to gain ground. People are furious. Critics are calling it a blatant attack on democracy, with Labour acting more like authoritarians than a government that trusts the people. It's one thing to debate policies, it's another to actively stop people from having a say in their future.
2026.
Secretary of State. Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, just kindly, when the member talks about dictators, it's Reform leader that hasn't faced and elected to get to his leadership position, but the only one that hasn't. And I say to the honourable member as well, look, we're not cancelling election. I've been really clear on the rationale, which is not unique. It's not something that hasn't been done before. It's for reorganisation. It's for further devolution, so people in that local area will get more powers from this government, which is what we promised through our manifesto, and we will continue to deliver for people.
And Angela Rayner? When confronted, she tried to spin it onto Nigel Farage, calling him divisive and dangerous, classic distraction. But it didn't work. People saw right through it. The fact remains, Labour took control of the system to silence opposition. And now, millions of voters are left wondering, who's next? Angela Rayner may be confident in front of a Labour rally, but when she steps into an interview with a sharp journalist, it's a different story. Time and time again, she's been publicly called out, leaving her scrambling for answers. Instead of clear policies and strong arguments, she falls into contradictions, vague responses, and empty political spin. One of the most brutal moments came during an interview with BBC's Laura Quentsberg. It was meant to be just another political discussion, but Quentsberg wasn't letting her off easy. She pressed Rayner on Labour's shifting policies, contradictions, and lack of clear answers. Rayner, usually quick with a fiery comeback, visibly struggled. She dodged, deflected, and at one point stumbled over her own words. It was uncomfortable to watch, and for Labour, it was damaging.
I think the issue here is some people see a double standard because for several years, the Labour Party very successfully created this story around Tory sleaze and cronies and corruptions. You yourself said, we need to know what these donors were promised or expected in return for their generosity. That was you saying that.
Yeah, and we saw, and Laura, we saw the VIP fast lanes on taxpayers' money, billions of pounds wasted during the COVID pandemic. These are individual donations. Nobody's been given billions of pounds contracts, millions of pounds contracts as a result. That's the distinction for me, is that people were given jobs in executive roles. People were given, you know, contracts worth billions of pounds when we didn't actually see the benefits of that.
I think
that was the distinction for me. But the transparency, you're absolutely right, and I absolutely believe the public want that in terms of where's money coming from.
Well, lots of our viewers...
This wasn't an isolated case. From interviews on Sky News to clashes with other journalists, the pattern is clear. When faced with real scrutiny, Rayner folds. She's passionate when shouting slogans but falls apart when asked to explain the details. The problem? People are noticing. When even friendly journalists leave her exposed, it raises serious questions. If she can't handle a tough interview, how can she handle leading the country? With each awkward, unconvincing answer, her reputation takes another hit. And at this rate, Labour's credibility might be next. Housing in the UK is already a crisis. Families are waiting years for council homes, people are struggling with rising rent, and homelessness is increasing. So when Angela Rayner and Labour pushed for policies prioritising migrants for council housing, it hit a nerve, a big one. For years, British citizens have been stuck on waiting lists, desperate for a home. They've paid taxes, worked hard, followed the rules, yet they're pushed to the back of the queue, and now? Labour's plan would mean that new arrivals get priority access, while many locals are left struggling.
Would you reverse the cuts on corporation tax?
I think that the cuts on corporation tax are missing a point because we need that money. We need that money at the moment.
Would you reverse it? Hold on.
Inheritance tax.
Would you reverse them?
I think that at the moment, cutting at a time where we need those services and people need those services is the wrong decision to
But
make.
I'm asking you, would you reverse the cut in corporation tax?
But I'm telling you, Andrew, that our priority is
You're not telling me the question.
I am.
The
I'm
answer.
saying that the cuts in corporation tax, the cuts in inheritance tax, the cuts in capital gains tax.
What's the cut in capital gains tax?
But what's really important, Andrew...
No, excuse me, I'm asking you a question. What's the cut in the capital gains tax?
They've cut the capital gains tax.
People aren't just angry, they're furious. The backlash was instant, with critics calling it a betrayal of working-class Brits. These are the very people Labour claims to stand for, yet once again, they feel ignored. Instead of fixing the broken system, Labour's answer is to sideline British families in favour of virtue-signalling policies. Rayner, of course, tried to spin it, talking about fairness, human rights, and inclusivity. But no amount of political speech can change reality. British citizens see what's happening. And with every unfair policy, Labour's credibility crumbles further. Housing isn't just a policy issue, it's about who the government actually prioritises. And right now, under Labour, it's not the British people. Angela Rayner started as Labour's firebrand, a working-class voice who was supposed to connect with everyday people. But now, with every misstep, her credibility is falling apart. From being humbled on live TV to failing to define working people, from dodging tough interviews to pushing controversial policies, the damage is piling up. People who once saw her as a strong leader now see someone struggling to defend her own party's actions.
He's killing, thousands of Americans by giving them duff advice, and his macho, I'm all right, look at me, I've survived COVID, is an absolute buffoon. He has no place in the White House. He's an embarrassment, and he should be ashamed of himself, especially when thousands of Americans have died.
And it's not just about Rayner, it's about Labour itself. The party's handling of voter suppression, economic struggles and housing policies isn't just angering the public, it's creating serious fractures within Labour's own voter base. Working-class Brits, once Labour's strongest supporters, are turning away in frustration. The warning signs are clear. If Labour keeps silencing voters, pushing unpopular policies, and ignoring the concerns of ordinary people, the backlash won't just be in the media, it'll be at the ballot box. Rayner's future looking shaky? Labour's future on the line. If things don't change fast, the next election could be brutal, and this time the voters will have the final say. Angela Rayner's political career is on thin ice. From public humiliations to tone-deaf policies, she's losing trust fast. Labour's grip on voters is weakening and the backlash is only growing. What do you think? Is Rayner finished? Let us know in the comments, like, share, and subscribe for more updates.